There's this hidden bias that has quietly but totally shaped the history of science. It explains why so many groundbreaking contributions have been just, well, overlooked. It's called the Matilda Effect, and getting a handle on it means we have to rewrite what we think we know about who really drives discovery.
Just think about that for a second. That feeling. You come up with a brilliant idea, you put in the work, and then you watch someone else present it, and they get all the credit. It's that awful sting of being made invisible, right? Of having your contribution just erased.
Okay, now imagine if that frustration wasn't just some one-off thing that happened at the office. Imagine it was a deep, systemic pattern woven into the very fabric of your entire career. For countless women, especially in science, this wasn't just a feeling. It was the reality that defined their professional lives. Well, it turns out this phenomenon actually has a name. And giving it a name, that was the very first step in being able to fight back. So let's get into the story of how we uncovered the Matilda Effect.
And here it is, the Matilda Effect. It's the systematic tendency to downplay or straight up ignore or misattribute the work of women scientists, while their male colleagues get the credit. The term itself was actually coined back in 1993 by a historian named Margaret W. Rossiter, and she named it after Matilda Jocelyn Gage, a suffragist who fought fiercely to get women's achievements recognized.
Now, to really get the Matilda effect, it helps to know about what came before it. See, back in 1968, a sociologist named Robert K. Merton identified what he called the Matthew effect. Basically, the idea that the rich get richer, or in this case, the famous scientists get more famous, getting way more credit than lesser-known folks for similar work. But then Margaret Rossiter came along and pointed out a crucial gendered twist. So the Matilda effect is a really specific version of this, where gender is the dividing line between who gets the recognition and who's left in obscurity.
Okay, to see just how big of a deal this is, we need to look at maybe the most famous example in the entire history of science. It's a story about a photograph, a massive discovery, and a legacy that was almost completely erased.
So, in 1952, a scientist named Rosalind Franklin produced this image, Photo 51. It was this incredibly clear X-ray photo that was literally the key to unlocking the double helix structure of DNA. A year later, her data was shared, and this is key, without her full knowledge, with James Watson and Francis Crick. It was the final piece of the puzzle they needed. But when the Nobel Prize was handed out in 1962 for the discovery, Franklin's absolutely pivotal role was massively downplayed. It's just a classic and frankly tragic case of the Matilda effect in action. But look, this isn't just about going back and correcting historical footnotes, no way. The consequences of this bias are so real, and they affect science and all of us, even today. It creates this huge problem, the high cost of invisibility. The ripple effects here are just enormous. I mean, on an individual level, it completely undermines brilliant scientists. It hurts their careers. We're talking lost funding, missed opportunities, and unfair pay. But it's so much bigger than that. It actually distorts the true history of who drives progress. And think about this. It robs young girls of visible role models, which can make them feel like fields like STEM just aren't for them. And here's the bottom line. When we lose out on these perspectives, we actually narrow the scope of innovation for everybody.
So when you're faced with a bias that's this deep-rooted, what can you actually do? Well, the good news is that just recognizing the problem is already leading to some really concrete actions. So let's look at what that path toward a more equitable future looks like.
It really boils down to a pretty clear three-step framework. First up, awareness and education. We have to teach this history. We have to actively go out and highlight the work of women who've been overlooked for so long. Second, policy changes inside our institutions. Things like blind peer reviews, where the researcher's identity is hidden, can really help reduce bias in publishing and funding. And third, active recognition and advocacy. That means creating awards, grants, and programs designed specifically to spotlight the amazing work of women in these fields. And really, that's where it all begins. By giving the Matilda effect a name, we stop seeing these as just a bunch of isolated incidents and start recognizing them for what they are, a pattern. And it's a pattern that, once you see it, you can actively work to break, to build a future where contributions are judged on their merit and merit alone. So I'll leave you with this one question. As you go about your day, in meetings, in articles you're reading, just out in the world, whose contribution will you make a point to really see, to acknowledge, and to give credit to?